What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time to give you the top 10 most overrated teams heading into the 2022 college football season. I did this last year. I went back, looked at my video, and it turns out that almost every team in the video was overrated last year. They did not live up to preseason expectations. There were, I think, 2 or 3 that actually did have good seasons, but for the most part, every team that I did in the video, and I was even overrating some of them. I was even calling myself out in that video, and we're going to do that again here this year. The top 10 most overrated teams going into the season. I know this is a video that's going to make a lot of people angry, but it just is what it is. Don't worry, we'll do one about the top 10 underrated teams as well, so make sure you stay tuned for that. We're going to start this off with number 10, and that's the Baylor Bears. Baylor, a great year last year, 12-2. I've seen them, and when I say overrated, I'm just going to be talking about anywhere that I've seen a team ranked really high, or any of these publications that are high on teams. I've seen some people put Baylor as a top 10 team this year, and I'll tell you what, I was actually thinking this would probably be the favorite in the Big 12 this year, but the more you look at what they lost and everything, and you have to also just look at, was last year a little bit of a fluke? And this was a great team, don't get me wrong, but they were pretty fortunate last year. I just don't know if the overall roster talent reflects a 12-2 record. So a great job by the coaching staff, but you have to wonder if that'll catch up to them just a little bit this year. I think this will still be a good team, and they're not way overrated. Again, they're number 10 on the list, so I had to come up with 10 teams. But when you look at what they have coming back, I think they're going to miss their top 2 rushers from last year, Abraham Smith and Tristan Ebner. Those are big losses at that running back spot. They're going to be depending on some young guys that don't have a lot of carries. And then you look at the wide receivers, R.J. Sneed, Tyquan Thornton, 2 really good players at wide receiver for them. So I'm a little worried about the offense. Lost some guys on the offensive line as well. Not too concerned with the defense. I think Baylor's defense will be good, maybe the best defense in the Big 12. But I do worry about the offense just a little bit. Blake Shapen going to be taking over at quarterback. Looked good at the end of last year when Bohannon went down with the injury. We'll see how all of that plays out. But Baylor, a top 10 team, I don't know if I'm buying that. A good team, yes, but maybe not a top 10 team like I've seen them in some places. Moving on to number 9, the Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas coming off a great year, 9-4. Really surprised some people last season. Surprised me. I didn't expect them to be that good. And then you look ahead to this year. Look, this is going to be a good team. Don't get me wrong. Just because I'm saying they're overrated, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be a good team. But you are seeing their name thrown around as a team that could take down Alabama in the SEC West, and I just don't see that happening. I don't think they're really. I know the game was close last year. Look, Alabama had their issues on the offensive line. Some teams exposed that, and we saw that last year. And Arkansas's offense even did pretty good against Alabama last year. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be a different story this year in that game. Arkansas still, I think, will be, like I said, a good team. But, losing Traylon Smith at running back, he transferred out of there. That's a pretty big loss for them. And then Traylon Burks. I mean, he was their go-to guy, their everything wide receiver. Davion Warren, Tyson Morris also gone there. They did bring in Jaden Hazelwood, so that's a big pickup for them at wide receiver. But offense wasn't super explosive at times last year, and I think losing Traylon Burks is going to be a big loss for them. They also lost some guys on the offensive line as well. Defensive line, they lost Trey Williams. That's a pretty big loss there. Some other guys in there. Grant Morgan, a huge loss at linebacker. So you can just kind of go down through the list and see that this team lost some good players last year. Joe Fauci transferred out of there. Greg Brooks transferred. A lot of big losses really throughout the roster. While I do think that this team will be good, and they do bring in some players, I didn't go through all the players that they added through the transfer portal. This team will be good. I don't think that they're a team that's really going to threaten Alabama in the SEC West, and that's why I'm going to say that they are being overrated a little bit heading into this season. Moving on to number 8, that's NC State. Similar to Baylor, I think this is going to be a good team. I like this NC State team. But you see them thrown around a lot as a top 10 team preseason. I just don't know that they're going to be that good. I think they are being overrated just a little bit. Devin Leary played pretty well for them at quarterback last year, but they do lose their top 2 rushers. They lose some guys in the passing game, C.J. Riley Emeka Emezi at wide receiver, who was their best wide receiver last year. Dylan Parham, also a big-time weapon for them at tight end. And a couple of starters on the – or one starter on the offensive line, but it was a big one, maybe one of the best offensive linemen in the country last year. And then you look at the defense. I'm just worrying a little bit about the pass rush for this team. They lose Daniel Joseph, who's probably their best defensive lineman last season. And so they don't have a ton of guys out there that I think are really going to be able to get after the quarterback. I think that could be a weakness for their defense. And then they lose, just some depth at linebacker and Vi Jones. And at cornerback, they lose Chris Ingram, Derek Pitts. So they don't lose a whole lot. But I think this team was maybe a little bit overrated last year. They were a good team, but I think they also took advantage of some things like Clemson being down last season. So I think they're being overrated a little bit going into this year. Again, a good team, maybe a top 15 team. I don't know that I put them as a top 10 team just yet. Well, I mean, we'll see. They may prove me wrong, but I'm going to say that they're a little bit overrated coming into this year. Moving on to number 7, Iowa. And our next two teams are kind of carbon copies of each other. And we'll start here with Iowa. It's just a team that every year gets thrown to the top of the Big Ten West. Everyone just assumes that they're going to win the Big Ten West. Or at least be right there with Wisconsin, who I guess will give it away. That'll be the next team on the list. But they lose Tyler Goodson and Ivory Kelly-Martin, their two best rushers from last year. They just have not gotten it at the quarterback position. Spencer Petras just didn't play well last year. Tyrone Tracy transferred out. They don't really have a lot of weapons at wide receiver. Sam Laporta back at tight end. That's a big-time return for them. But they did lose Tyler Linderbaum, the best center in the country last year. Cody Ince also gone as well. Kyler Schott. So they lose some guys on the offensive line. Defense returns a lot of production from last year. They do lose some key players from that team, but like Dane Belton. But overall, they return a good bit of production. Matt Hankins also a big loss for them at cornerback. But it's all about the offense, and it's going to be the same story with Wisconsin. It's going to be all about the passing game. We haven't seen either one of these teams really take it that next step in their passing games, and it's catching up to them because you can't really win with defense or running the football. You can only get to a certain point. And again, Wisconsin, number 6 on the list. They were 9-4 last year. Graham Mertz continues to disappoint. I personally thought he was going to be great for them. I thought Wisconsin was going to be much better last season, and it just hasn't worked out that way. It just hasn't. Braylon Allen has been excellent at running back. He emerged last year, one of the top running backs in the country. But then you look at the passing game, which struggled. They lose several of their receivers from last year. Kendrick Pryor, gone. Danny Davis, gone. Jack Dunn, gone. Devin Chandler transferred. Jake Ferguson, their best pass catcher, their tight end, big weapon, gone. So I just don't really see the passing game being able to be much of a threat unless Graham Mertz just gets a lot better. And we just haven't seen that. And then you look at the defense. They lose more than Iowa. I mean, they lose Matt Henningsen at defensive end. Really good player for them. Leo Chenal, one of the best linebackers in the country. Jack Sanborn at linebacker, also gone. Those are big losses for them. Noah Burks at linebacker, gone. Faion Hicks at cornerback, gone. Caesar Williams at cornerback, gone. Scott Nelson at safety, gone. These were really good players. And so I think their defense actually takes a step back, a bigger step back than Iowa's. And I think they have the same kind of issues with the passing game. So I think Wisconsin, again, a lot of people are saying Iowa or Wisconsin will win the Big Ten West. I'll go ahead and tell you right now, I don't think either one of them will win the Big Ten West. I hate to spoil my predictions, and I could change my mind by the time I actually start the videos. But I think it's between Purdue, Minnesota, and Nebraska. I don't think Iowa or Wisconsin will win that Big Ten West. And so I think both of those teams are overrated. Good teams, don't get me wrong. They're borderline top 25 teams, but I just don't think that they're the favorites in the Big Ten West. I think someone else is probably going to win that division. Moving on to number 5 with Texas. Okay, for our next two teams, they are kind of similar. Texas was not good last year. They were 5-7. You look at the offense. Their offense was good. I mean, they were able to score some points. They were able to run the football. They've got a lot of weapons on that side of the ball. They've added some weapons. They should be really good on offense again. But on defense, did they really do much to improve that defense? I'm not really seeing it. So I think this team will struggle once again on the defensive side of the ball. And because of that, can you really say that Texas has a chance to make a run at the college football playoff or anything like that? I don't think you can. I think they will be much better than last year, maybe a top 25 team, but not a playoff contender in my opinion, because we're going to see a similar team that we saw last year, a little bit better, I think, on both sides of the ball, but not enough to make a huge jump, which some people are predicting. Number 4 is USC, and they're in a very similar position. And this one's just crazy because Lincoln Riley comes over to USC, and he is just stockpiling talent at the skill positions. You look at their running backs, you look at their wide receivers. Now they have Caleb Williams at quarterback. This might be the deepest group of skill position players in the country. I mean, they're absolutely loaded. But that wasn't really a problem for them last year. That's not where the problem was. It was the offensive line. It was the defense. Now, I think this offensive line will be pretty good. When I look at that roster, I don't have too many concerns with them on that offensive line. Defense, they just didn't do enough, in my opinion, on that side of the ball, adding in transfers, which they did. They added a ton of transfers on offense, but I don't think they added enough high-impact players on the defensive side of the ball to make them a playoff contender. And we've seen some people throwing USC's name in there to be a playoff contender. I don't see that. I think the defense is going to hold them back. I could be wrong. Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma was able to get to the college football playoff with a great offense and not a good defense. So it's possible he gets there. But I think there are some other good teams in the Pac-12. Oregon and Utah are going to be tough to get through. Stanford, I think, is going to be an improved team this year. And even if they do somehow make it, I don't see this team competing with one of those top 3 teams in the country. We're talking about Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. So USC, the future is very bright. The future is very bright. They have a chance, I think, to own the Pac-12 like they did in the 2000s. But for this year specifically, I'm not seeing it. I think that this team will be good, but not great. Number 3 is Penn State. Penn State's a team that I see some people say, hey, this team's going to challenge Ohio State. This is the second best team in the Big Ten East. I disagree with it. I think they're the 4th best team in that division, maybe even the 5th best, depending on Maryland. For the last couple of years, in 2020, this team struggled, and we thought, well, it was just a fluke year. And then you go to last year, and they struggled again. Michigan was a fluke in 2020. Michigan did not struggle last year. They went to the college football playoff. You start with Sean Clifford at quarterback. He just has not proven a lot. He's not going to take this team to the next level, in my opinion. They lose John Lovett and Noah Cain at running back. I think they'll be fine at running back, though. They've got some guys in there. They added a big-time freshman. And that's one of the things everyone talks about, the freshmen coming in, this last recruiting class. Keep in mind that most freshmen don't have a huge impact right away. Most of them, it takes a little time. And so just because you had a great recruiting class, and we're going to touch on this with another team in a second, you might already know who I'm talking about, but Jahan Dotson at wide receiver, a big loss for them. They did add in a transfer, I believe he's from Western Kentucky, who is going to help them out at that wide receiver spot, Mitchell Tinsley. But again, it comes back to Sean Clifford throwing the football. I just haven't seen him do anything to kind of take that next step. And then the offensive line loses a lot. Rasheed Walker is gone. Eric Wilson is gone. Mike Miranda is gone. Anthony Wiggin is gone. This is an offensive line that loses a lot, and that could that could slow them down in the run game and also in pass protection with Sean Clifford. So that offense, really, I don't see anything that makes me think they're going to be better on that side of the ball. And then you go to the defense. They lose some really talented players. Arnold Ibikite, Jesse Lukita, and I'm sorry if I say some of the names wrong, gone. 2 really good defensive ends. Brett Hansford, Derek Tangelo, defensive tackles in the middle, really good players. You look at the line, you can go down the list. Brandon Smith, Ellis Brooks at linebacker, Tariq Castro-Fields at cornerback, Jaquan Brisker, one of the best safeties in the country. This team loses a ton of production off the defense. They lose a lot from the offensive line, and it's a team. They went 7-6 last year, so if you're expecting them to make a big jump, I'm sorry, one recruiting class is not going to make that big of a difference. I think Penn State definitely overrated coming into this season, and I don't have them in my preseason top 25. Number 2 is Oklahoma State, another team that I've seen in the preseason top 10 that I think is big time overrated. Spencer Sanders back at quarterback. Everyone points to that and say, well, this was a good team last year. They returned their starting quarterback. That's great, but they lose their top 2 rushers from last year, their top receiver, and Tay Martin. Brendan Presley, really the only guy that comes back for them at wide receiver that I think has a chance to be a really good player, unless some of these young guys can develop. Logan Carter at tight end also gone. They lose Josh Sills, their best offensive lineman from last year. Danny Godlewski at center, also another big loss for them. So there's not a lot that makes me think the offense should be improved. They could maybe be as good as they were last year, but improved, I don't really see that. And then you go to the defense. They should have a really good pass rush. That's the one thing they've got going for them. They lose Antoine in the middle of that defensive line. But it's Malcolm Rodriguez and Devin Harper, two really, really good linebackers that are gone, and they don't have much experience or production behind them. That is going to be a big loss. And then in the secondary, this team loses almost everyone. They do not have much production at all coming back in the secondary. Christian Holmes at corner, gone. Jarrett Converse, gone. Trey Sterling at safety, gone. Tanner McAllister, gone. Colby Harvey Pill. I mean, they lose a ton of production in that secondary. Pretty much everyone is gone. Their starting two linebackers are gone. The pass rush will help, but an offense that I don't think is going to be much better makes me think that Oklahoma State is not going to be a top 10 team this year, and I think that they are overrated. Now we go to number one, and this is the number one team for me last year on the same exact video, and it proved to be true. A lot of people had Texas A&M as potentially a playoff team last year because of what they did in 2020, and I wasn't buying it. I even overrated this team because I think I picked them at 9-3 maybe, and they only went 8-4. But here's the deal with Texas A&M. Okay, they had a great recruiting class. Yes, it was maybe the best recruiting class of all time. I think I may have saw where it was ranked the best of all time. And that is great, but that does not translate to immediate success. It's going to take some time, and the future is very bright for Texas A&M. I mean, they have a chance to compete with Alabama and Georgia in the near future. But this year, I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen right away. It's going to take some time. This was an 8-4 team last year. And again, 8-4 last year. You have questions at quarterback. Max Johnson, will he be the starter? He does have experience at least. They lose Isaiah Spiller, best running back, one of the best running backs in the SEC last year. A-Chain is there at running back, yes, but they don't have a lot of depth, a lot of proven depth behind him. Wide receiver position looks pretty good for them. Wademeyer, gone at tight end. Jameer Johnson and Kenyon Green, gone on the offensive line. And then we get to the defense. Tyree Johnson, really good player, gone. Michael Clemens, gone. DeMarvin Leal, gone. Jaden Peavy, Derek Hunter. I mean, you go down the list, this team loses a ton of production off of that defensive line. They lose Aaron Hansford, who was maybe their best linebacker last year. Secondary looks a little bit better. They do lose Leon O'Neal, though. Brian Williams going to be gone. Eric Young gone. But it's just, you look at everything that they lose, and if you expect these freshmen to come in right away and make this team a playoff contender, I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. 2023, this team could be very dangerous. If they get a quarterback that can play well for them, they could be very, very dangerous. But this year, I'm just not buying it. And I've been right on Texas A&M. I correctly predicted them to only lose one game in 2020. I said they were overrated last year. That proved to be true. I also said they were overrated in 2019, which proved to be true. So I've been right on this team. Got nothing against this team. I know if you see them number one on this list 2 years in a row, you think I'm a Texas A&M hater. That's not true at all. I'm just calling it like I see it. And I think Texas A&M is the most overrated team. A lot of people have them in the top 5. This is not a top 5 team unless these freshmen just come in there and they're superstars right away, which is just not something you normally see. Maybe a couple of them will be, but most of them will not. And again, because of all of that, I think Texas A&M, the most overrated team heading into 2022. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Who do you think's overrated? Who do you think I put on my list that's not overrated? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.